Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. The Green Bay Metro Fire Department is grieving the loss of an engineer and paramedic, Tyler Kreiter.
While the department reflects on the life of a hero, they also acknowledge the dangers of being a firefighter.
News for Jamal James is in the newsroom after speaking with Kreiter's colleagues today. Jamal.
Bill and Cammie, Tyler Kreiter put his life on the line to serve those in the community during his 17-year journey at Fire Station 6, but over the last 3 years, he's been dealing with occupational cancer. Today, his colleagues gathered at the fire station to talk about his impact on the department and the community, once being honored by the state as the 90th Assembly District's First Responder of the Year. Back in 2021, Kreiter was diagnosed with a rare soft tissue cancer and spent most of his year undergoing chemotherapy. Action 2 News was there when he celebrated his last round of chemotherapy, surrounded with support from fellow firefighters and family. Today, Fire Chief Matthew Knott talked about Kreiter's courage and the dangers of the job.
Cancer rates among firefighters are at an all-time high, and this is due to the exposures we face daily. Firefighters are 14 times more likely to die from cancer than the general public.
As the fire department continues to reflect on Kreiter's legacy, they say they will release details on funeral arrangements at a later date. Bill?